Friends, the sun is shining. It's a lovely day, and we're back with another episode of Doable Discipleship. My name is Jason Wieland.
I'm Brandon Robinson.
And this is a Saddleback Church podcast designed to help you deepen your faith, or as we like to call it,
the show that helps you grow.
I really hope I am getting that little bit right. I would always get it wrong, and Doug would tell me, you've botched it again. And I don't have him here to tell me if I'm botching it again. So, you know what? We're sticking with it.
Yeah.
So right or wrong doesn't matter. It's what we're doing now. Friends, welcome back. We have been in this series on fresh starts. And so we started out with just an overview of fresh starts and an encouragement to think through some fresh starts for the new year. And then we talked about spiritual and physical health in the episode right after that. And then last week we talked about financial and relational health. Which was, I felt, just a really good look at kind of these areas and encouragement to start to take hold of those areas and get some fresh starts in those. So this episode, rather than doing a pair of different areas of health, we wanted to focus in a little bit more on emotional health. Now, this is a topic that we have talked about before on the podcast. But they've actually, every time we've talked about them, have been some of our most popular episodes, most watched episodes, or listened to episodes, I should say. And so we know that this is it's a big area of interest. It's an area of, and we can understand the reason why, because it's such kind of a prevalent theme right now, is this kind of inner look at our emotional lives. There's a lot of great books out about emotional health right now. And so we just wanted to look at it from the angle of fresh starts. So some different things for you that are good to be aware of, to ask yourself some questions on if you're experiencing some unhealth, and then we're going to end with actually a really cool exercise. So make sure to stay through to the end of the episode, because we're gonna have a really special ending this week. Yeah.
So as we look at emotional health, right, we're gonna define emotional health like this: it is our ability to be self-aware and to love well. Our ability to be self-aware and love well. So as we throughout this episode, as we're talking about different things, that is what we are looking at. That's what we mean when we say emotional health: our ability to be self-aware and to love well. So just starting out, so asking the question, why is it so important that we pay attention to our emotional health, right? Because, and I think in a little bit of this is there's a line of thinking that goes like inner life, emotional health. It could be like skew a little bit new agey. That's not really what we're getting at here. What we're saying is God has created us as emotional beings. This is a part of our community. This is a part of who we are. So with that being the case, we would do well to look at it. So a few things up top. Looking at our emotional health, it directly impacts our ability to love well, right? It's usually the way we see, the way we deal with ourselves, the way we see ourselves. Oftentimes, that's what's getting projected onto the people that we love, the people that are closest to us. So our ability to see and deal with our emotional health or our feelings, another word you can say, that has a huge impact on how we see and treat others.
Yeah, it's not just you. Like your emotional health doesn't affect just you. It affects everything that has to do with your life, really. But it has a major effect too on your relational health.
Yeah, and we got into a little bit of that on the last episode with the relational health. These things go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So also, and we typically we're operating out of our emotions. I think we would love to think that we are we give ourselves a little bit more credit for being more rational than we probably are.
Yeah.
That is absolutely part of our decision making process, but a big part of that, what's all happening in our kind of our subconscious under the surface, is the emotions. So I kind of like to think of emotions. I think it's helpful to think of them as like an operating system on your phone. So whether you have an iPhone, whether you have Samsung Galaxy, Google Pick, whatever phone you have, whatever computer you have, tablet you have, there's something on there called an operating system. And that operating system is running the phone, it's running the computer, it's running the tablet, it's how you see things, it affects the speed, it affects so much, it affects your entire experience on that device. And our emotions are kind of like that. They're the lens that through we see the world, we see other people, we see God, we see ourselves. So our desires, our fears, the things that intrigue us, our emotions, the things that go into our emotional makeup, all of these things are kind of in our subconscious, silently behind the scenes, motivating us to make certain decisions. And I think we would do well. I think it honors God when we look at these things and we examine them.
Yeah, they're filters, they're lenses, like you were saying. And so everything that you see or take part of or think about is often colored by your emotions. So if that's going to be true, if that's true, which we are positing that it is, then it's important, it's vital that you think about what your emotional state is. Because if it's coloring everything else, it's like if you are wearing rose-tinted glasses, then you need to be aware of that because it affects it affects what you believe to be true about the world. And it's true with your emotional health, because what you believe to be true based on your stated emotions might not necessarily be factually true.
Yeah.
Because you are seeing through this filter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you take the past 6 months or even the past year, any big decision that you've made it with your head, but you've also made that decision with your heart.
Yeah.
It is part of the underlying motivating factors for why we do what we do. But I don't want to paint that in a negative light, because emotions are part of our humanity.
Totally.
God gave us these emotions. We are emotional beings. And we see that even with God. God is emotional. And again, I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean it we see Jesus throughout the Gospels having compassion on the crowds, healing sick, stopping. All of these things are driven by the emotional side of him, the emotional makeup. So this isn't a bad thing. So I think when we pay attention to things like excitement, when we pay attention to things like joy, I think oftentimes God can be nudging us in certain ways. I was having a conversation with a guy who is kind of in a transition. He's thinking about, okay, making a big decision. Should I take this job? Should I take the other job? What should I do? And I just asked him the simple question, well, what brings you joy? When you look at these two things on paper, does one excite you? Is there anything about it that is bubbling under the surface? And I think it's in those moments when he was like, yeah, I think this one makes more sense, but the other one, I find so much joy and excitement with it. I'm fired up to do that. I'm saying, I think that may be in a lot of cases, God nudging us in certain directions, kind of like that game we play when we were younger kids, like warmer, cold, hot.
Yeah.
It's in those moments of excitement, it's in those moments of joy that God could be saying, great, like warmer,
Totally.
a little bit warmer, hot. This is good. Explore here, discover here, walk down this path. But the other side of that, I do want to make the point. I'm not saying that any feeling we have, that's God speaking. That's not the case at all. A very close friend of mine, I'm not going to say who he is. He doesn't even live in California. So.
I was going to say, are you talking about me?
Yeah, very close friend of mine, Jason Wheel. No. He was going through school, pursuing his master's, and there was a point where he was picking up the guitar and he just really enjoyed playing. Yeah. And he started flirting with the idea of, maybe I should like leave school and just pursue music full time. And I'm like, just word of advice. I love you. That's more of a hobby. Just because you feel excitement in playing guitar, that doesn't mean that you need to drop everything and be a traveling musician.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he didn't. But I just want to say, feelings aren't final, and it doesn't mean that they are just because we feel something, we have to pursue it with all of us. But I do think it's an invitation to explore it further. And in that invitation, we learn more about ourselves, that self-awareness, and we also learn more about God.
Yeah. It's also important to keep in mind that there are kind of two extreme schools of thought usually when it comes to this idea of emotions, right? First is there's a whole bunch of people out there, perhaps you're one of them, who think that emotions and feelings are bad. that you should avoid them at all costs, that they don't have a place in civil society, that it is unbecoming or unrespectful or whatever it is. It shows
could be seen as a sign of weakness.
Exactly. It shows immaturity to have emotions or to show emotions or to express emotions, especially when it comes to anger or sadness or or even overjoy. It can be almost like it could be embarrassing in the school of thought to see somebody that is expressing heavy emotions one way or another, and usually these are people that value kind of stoicism. They value just looking and acting cool, or that nothing phases you. And so really, when that's one extreme.
Yeah.
That's one extreme. Another extreme is this idea that, all of my feelings are valid and others must bend to them. That feelings are king almost, and that you then expect other people to change everything or to change their views or their opinion or whatever based on your feelings.
Yeah.
It's kind of this just, idea of, oh, I feel this way. And that can often lead to heart projection, or this idea of, I feel this way, everybody else should feel this way, or I feel this way, so therefore you must treat me this way, or whatever.
If it's a negative emotion or a negative feeling, it's I feel this way because of you, and it's also your responsibility to make me not feel this way. Which is unhealthy, putting an unhealthy expectation on other people.
And this can also come back to this idea that you were just talking about of, it doesn't mean that we follow any feeling on a whim. There are some people who perhaps lead their lives based on this idea of, oh, I have this feeling, I will go do. I have this feeling that leads me to this. And so it's the opposite of the other extreme, which we talked about, which was avoid feelings at all costs. And this one is look for feelings at all costs and then obey them. And, so these are kind of two kind of definite extremes when it comes to emotions, how we approach, how we deal with emotions. There's this great quote from Dallas Willard that says, "Feelings are good servants, but disastrous masters." And Beautiful. It's just this idea that when you put emotions on a pedestal in one way or another, in either of these extremes, when you give them this high place of value like that, then and allow them to be dictators of your life, then they can become malevolent dictators. It can be disastrous, as Dallas said. But feelings are good servants. So you can use the feelings that you have in order to drive in different ways, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as we talk about some doable fresh start kind of things.
They're not in and of themselves disastrous.
Feelings are not bad.
They're not bad. It's feelings. How we respond to those feelings. What are we doing with those feelings that we have? And we'll look at that in a little bit later on in the show. So kind of thinking through this emotional health, the question can come up, okay, well, how do I know if I'm an emotionally healthy person? How do I know if these are areas for me to grow? How do I assess? How do I gauge where I'm at with my emotional health? And I want to look at 5 different things, actually. The first one is this. It's ignoring the emotions of anger, sadness, and fear. Ignoring these emotions. So anger, sadness, fear, these are a part of our life experience. And I understand that they're also difficult emotions to deal with. Take anger, for instance. Anger, I've heard it said, is a secondary emotion, meaning something is actually making you feel angry.
Sure.
You feel,
it's a response.
It's a response. You feel the anger and it feels visceral, but that's not actually something is causing that anger. And it's mostly either it's feeling betrayed, it's a sense of loss that's fueling that anger or sadness. Nobody likes to feel sad.
Yeah.
And it's easy when you're feeling sad to go, I don't want to feel this way. So I guess I'll just maybe just binge a show on Netflix. We all have different things that we go to cope with that anger. I mean, not anger, that feeling of sadness, because no one likes to feel that. And then you also have something like fear. And with fear, that's a tough one too, because that's also a part of our makeup. It's a part of who we are. And with fear in particular, there's a school of thought, I would say, that if we do feel fear, it's like, okay, well, I just don't have enough faith. This is somehow an indictment on my faith in God, or I'm not believing enough because I feel fear. Yes, and I want to say that's not the case. We all feel fear, and we're all going to feel fear, and that's not an indictment on you not having faith one way or the other. And even with this, there are things like Philippians 4:7. It's be anxious for nothing, be anxious for nothing, be fearful for nothing. Yes, that's true. But in all these things, give these things with supplication and thanksgiving to God. So it's not saying that it's not okay to be fearful. It's not saying it's not okay to feel anxious. It's in feeling this feeling. What are you doing with it? Are you giving it to God in thanksgiving? That's the next step. That's the extra mile.
Exactly. Feelings will come, and those are not. It's not bad that feelings come up. It's just what you do with them. It's the space that you allow them to reside in.
Yeah, that can
become problematic.
Giving it to God, presenting it to God. Another thing is life without limits. So can we say no? Can we say, or do we feel like we have to be all things to all people all the time, or always saying yes, or always burning the candle at both ends, constantly just feel burned out and fatigued?
Yeah.
Saying no. The thing with limits are actually healthy, because limits teach us and tell other people, hey, I'm not God. God is God. Yeah. God can be all things to all men, but I can't do that. So because of that, because I'm going to love myself well, like we talked about being emotionally healthy, being self-aware and loving well. Part of that is loving yourself well, and loving yourself well is going, okay, I need to say no here, because I know that I can't give anything to this situation. There's nothing for me. I can't do anything. And it's also communicating to the other party or the other people that, hey, I'm setting this boundary because I don't want you to have an unhealthy expectation of me that I can be something that I'm not, or that I could be God because I'm not. Limits are saying, no, God is God. I'm not God. I serve God. I worship God, but I'm not God. And also 3, another thing could be dying to the wrong things. So yes, Jesus does ask us to die to ourselves. Yes, Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me, but that's not all desire is bad desire. And I think there's times where any desire that we have, we can set it up as, okay, this is in opposition to God. God does not want me to feel this way. We are to die to the selfish desires, the sinful desires in us. Absolutely. But there's also things that are good and blessed by God, healthy desires. There's good things like friendship, the desire to have friendship, companionship, fellowship, joy. There's art, there's beauty, there's nature. There's so many things that God has given to us to enjoy. And we shouldn't feel guilty for them. We shouldn't feel like we have to cut them off because we're going, if I desire to do that, is that somehow in opposition, or is this an idol in my life? Is this thing versus God? Not necessarily. No, that doesn't mean that's the case. Yes, sinful things, absolutely. But there's also lots of good. And these desires, I think, are actually, we need to get curious about them.
Yeah.
We can explore them. We can examine them. But I think oftentimes they can be gifts from God and invitations to get to know him more.
Yeah, agreed. So those were 3 points. We have a couple more, but I just want to make sure that these were all clear to. So we're talking about this idea of how do you know if you are emotionally unhealthy, and these are kind of some signs of that. Is these signs of ignoring the emotions of anger and sadness and fear, these kind of harder ones. If you are ignoring those, that's not usually a good sign, because it means that you have perhaps a distorted view or appreciation for those emotions.
Yeah.
A second one was living without limits. So this idea of, are you somebody that says yes to everything? Are you a people pleaser in that way? Are you somebody who doesn't have these emotional safeguards in your life? That could be a problem. Are you somebody, or another area that could be an area of emotional unhealth is dying to the wrong things, which is what Brandon was just talking about. A fourth is this question of dividing our lives into the sacred and the secular. This can be very problematic if we have, this idea where our spirituality or our quote unquote godly lives or whatever, our Christian living, if you will, is just tied to a certain place or certain people or to things. And so when we're in those places or with those people or doing these things, that's when we say, oh, I'm engaging my spirituality now, or I am focused on being a Christian now. Or do we live with this kind of understanding that God is with us wherever we go? That as Christians, it's literally a life calling. It is all encompassing. Our faith is all encompassing. It should have an effect. It should have an influence, and it should really change the way that we operate. It's going back to the operating system, kind of thing that you were talking about, of everything that we do. So it's an encouragement to think about that just a little bit, is how do you view your life as a believer, as a Christian? Do you think about it in terms of your entire life, or do you think about it in terms of Sunday mornings, perhaps Wednesday evenings, or perhaps with, these certain people, I will be a Christian with these people. These other people, I'd rather they not know that I'm Christian. That kind of thing. Like, is your life compartmentalized in that way, or are you somebody who is living a life of worship and realizing that all life is worship? Everything that you do, engagement, how you live your life in all facets reflects your view of your relationship with God. Hopefully that made sense. So that was 4, and then a fifth point of a potential unhealth is this idea of doing for God instead of being with God. And this can lead to a few different aspects of emotional unhealth, is because in America and in many places in the world, but we can speak to America because that's where we are. It tends to put productivity as the highest of priorities.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't say that Finland is the same, because Finland just introduced the 4-day, 6 hours a day work week.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's Finland. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think it was Finland.
That sounds right.
And all the reports are showing that actually their productivity has gone up. Like things are better since they've done that. I'm just saying I saw an article or something about that. But here in America, the productivity is king, and what you can accomplish, what you can show that you have done is the best indicator of your worth, of your value right now.
Yeah.
Right. But really, as Christians, we need to realize that our identity is not in our doing, but it's in God's love for us. That needs to be the first and foremost place that we put our identity. It's not in your productivity. It's not in your bottom line or your quota. It's in the truth of God's love for you. And then it needs to tie into this idea that our activity for God must be fueled by our being with God. When we're talking about emotional health, I want to make this perfectly clear. When we're talking about emotional health, you cannot expect any change to happen if you are not doing it with God, if
Yeah.
you are not spending time with God and being with God. God is your creator. God created your emotions. As we talked about earlier, God has emotion. God is, he is emotional in the healthy sense of the word.
Mhm.
And so any change that you want to make, any fresh start that you want to make with your emotional health needs to be in partnership with God. Now, that's not to say that emotional health is guaranteed just by being with, like all I have to do is go out on an extended retreat time and I will be emotionally healthy. That's not.
It's a process.
It doesn't. It probably, I should say probably, wouldn't work that way. It's a process, but I can guarantee that if you try to do it just on your own and not with God and say, I am going to get myself emotionally healthy by myself through the power of the flesh, through me, I can guarantee that you will fail in that, because you cannot get emotionally healthy apart from God.
That's good.
True, genuine emotional health.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be in partnership with your creator. It needs to be in partnership with the Spirit who is living in you.
Yeah.
It needs to be in partnership with God. It just does.
That's a message, man. That's a sermon.
There we go.
I like
We're
it.
done, right, Dave? No. We're not quite done yet. We're finishing up. So we've talked about these ideas of, these areas of potential unhealth. And so as we talked about those, hopefully you were kind of thinking in terms of yourself too, as, okay, is this something that I struggle with? Is this something I find myself falling into? Is this a trap that I need to avoid? All these different things. Hopefully that's what you were doing during this last section.
And don't view these things as a way to beat yourself up. If there's
definitely
something
not.
in here you're like, oh, that is definitely me, that's not something to be ashamed
That's
of.
why these are fresh starts.
These are fresh starts. Don't beat yourself up about this. This is a part of the self-awareness that we were talking about in the beginning of emotional health, being self-aware and loving well. Part of that is we have to do things like this to get an accurate reading of where we're at. So if one of these things, or maybe two of them, or whatever it may be, was just pinging to you, like beep, 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 that's me. That's okay. Because now that's something you go, okay, I know where I'm at here. Now I can take some steps out of this place.
Yeah.
I can give these things to God. It's not all on your shoulders to change it, but we give it to God and we start to take intentional steps into health. And we'll look at that in a second, but don't beat yourself up if you are feeling like you're not doing one of these areas well.
Exactly. These are things that always come up. There are areas here that I struggle with. There are areas I know that Brandon struggles with. And so it's just, it's just encouragement for us to, be constantly going back and just reassessing and then focusing on then how do I fix that area, or how do I get healthy? How do I partner with God in fixing and growing in those areas? So for this topic with emotional health, what we want to do, and the big encouragement that we want to do right now, there's other ways that you can too. There's great books like Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, Emotional Healthy Leader. There's great books on emotional health. There are programs here at Saddleback like support groups, like Celebrate Recovery, like counseling, these different areas that you can engage with specifically around this idea of emotional health. But right now, what we want to do is something different. It's like Monty Python start, right? And now for something completely different. We've never done something quite like this to end an episode before, but I think it's valuable. So what we're actually going to be doing is this period of slowdown. And this is our encouragement for you too, is we live in just this fast-paced life. And so it's important to create these times of margin, these slowdown times in our lives to rest and to reflect. And especially when we're talking about emotional health, it's vital. So what we're going to be doing is leading you through this exercise called a prayer of examine. It's really this self-reflective prayer where we ask ourselves these questions, but we're doing it in conversation with God.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do kind of the little close bit right here that we would normally do for an episode, but don't turn it off. We're not stopping.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it.
You don't want to miss
really
it
good.
because then Brandon is going to lead you through this exercise. So how it's going to work is Brandon will go through this prayer of examine with you, and have these prompts, and then there'll be periods where we won't talk for a little bit. So we'll have this nice music that's playing under, but so if you don't hear us talking, it's because we have it's an open space for you to pray in response to the prompt. Okay, and then you'll know when the episode is done, because Brandon will close with amen. So that's when this is done. So again, don't turn it off. There's nothing wrong with your app or whatever you're listening to the podcast on. It's just, and we encourage you to take this time. Now, if you are driving in your car, this is an important warning. Do not close your eyes to do this prayer. Okay, I just want to make sure we get that out of the way. Don't want any issues. Okay, so what we will be doing now is entering into this prayer of examine.
All right. So first things first, when we're entering into this prayer, what we want to do is we want to ask ourselves, we want to ask God, help me to see myself as you see me. As we go back and look through the past day, the past 24 hours, whatever it may be, God, I pray that you would bring up certain things to my mind that I need to be aware of, whether those things are good, whether those things are bad. And the goal is to not judge what comes up, but to let it come up. And that's what we're praying, to ask God to see ourselves as he sees us. So we'll start it now. God, as we move into this space, as we reflect and have desires to be emotionally healthy, God, I pray that you would help me and us see ourselves as you see us. Help me see myself as you see me. God, I pray that as I look back over the past day, God, bring to mind what you'd have me to know. And I pray that I would not judge what comes up. So let's start with this, just thinking through, what are we thankful for? Ask God, what am I thankful for? It may be family. It may be an encouraging text that someone may have sent you, whatever that may be. What are these areas in our life that we're thankful for? Okay, so for this next portion, as we just thought through what we're thankful for, the next portion, what we're going to do is we're going to review the past day. So we're going to ask a few prompts, a few questions, and in this space, we're going to give some space in here to think and reflect and to pray. So the first thing is this: as we're reviewing the day, the first thing is, God, where have I felt true joy today? What's excited me? Where have I felt joy? Has anything troubled me today? Anything that brought fear, anything that brought anxiety? What's troubled me today? What's challenged me today? God, what's challenged me today? Has there been anything that I saw, that I read, that I heard, that struck a chord with me, that pricked me, that challenged my way of thinking? Is there anything today that challenged me? where and when did I pause today? God, has there been any places in the past day where I stopped, or I noticed myself stop, or I noticed myself pause? And then, have I noticed God's presence in any of this? God, was I aware of you in any of the things that I've just been thinking about? Did I notice your presence in it? So after we review, then we respond. So it may be something like, my wife said something to me, or my husband said something to me that really pricked me, and I got a little short with them. God, I need to apologize. I need to go to them and say, hey, I'm sorry for being short with you. What you said, for whatever reason, pricked me in a certain way, and I shouldn't have responded that way. I'm sorry. So is there anything, or maybe it's something like where you felt joy, or you felt loved, or maybe someone shot you a really nice, encouraging text and said something to you, and you just need to text them and say, hey, thank you so much for what you said. That meant so much to me. I'm really grateful. It could be something like that. Is there anything that from what just came up in that review period that you need to respond to? So have you prayed through these different places where maybe God has prompted you, or God has nudged you to respond in a certain way? Now we're going to look forward to the next day. Look forward to what's coming ahead, the next day, the next week. And as we look forward, what comes to mind? Is it fear? Is it joy? Is it excitement? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is there any things, as we look through these different emotions, is there anything that when we think about the next day or the next week, that does it make us feel a certain way? What comes to mind? I want to give us some space to pray through that. Ask God, what's coming to mind as I think through what's coming next? So that's the prayer of examine. That's the goal with it, is to be self-aware, to have space, to create space in our lives where we can pray through our previous say, pray through these things. It may be 3 minutes, it may be 30 minutes. But the goal is to be self-aware, and not just self-aware, but to take that a step further and to love God, love ourselves, and love our neighbor as ourselves, love others well. So let's close it with a prayer, and we'll be done. Jesus, thank you for how you've created us. God, thank you for how you've made us. God, I pray that as we've reflected through where we're at in life, as we reflect through our emotional health, as we reflected through our past day, God, that you brought things to our attention that you would like to deal with, that you've brought things to our attention that are going to make us more self-aware and self-aware for the purpose of loving others well, loving you well, and loving ourselves well. We love you. We thank you for how much you love us and what you've given us. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
If you enjoyed this episode, consider giving us a rating or a review on iTunes. If you do, you'll help other people find us in the future. You can also listen to these episodes on YouTube. Just subscribe to the Saddleback Church YouTube channel for these conversations, plus lots of other video content. And if you are already listening to us on YouTube, subscribe to the Doable Discipleship podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app so you can listen in the car or wherever else you go. Don't forget to visit saddleback.com/doable to check out all of our previous episodes. And you can go to saddleback.com/grow to find spiritual growth resources and view a calendar of upcoming events. Lastly, you can always get in touch with us by emailing maturity@saddleback.com. Send us your thoughts, send us your questions, your Bible questions, your life questions, whatever. Who knows? Your question might just inspire an upcoming episode. Thanks again for tuning in to Doable Discipleship. I'm Jason Whelan, and I hope you'll join us again next week.